Hello there my friends, my name is RiskFish and today I'm bringing you a video on ReZero, but before I begin I want to give a big thank you to the support I have received in my last videos. It's been really encouraging to me to see all this feedback and has also helped to make my videos better, so thank you very much for that. Just a quick note though, I have also started a Discord server where you guys can see what I am working on, discuss theories with me, or just have a laugh in general, so I will link that below. Moving on to the main topic of the video though, today we are carrying on with my theme series in which we'll look at how Suburu's deaths are caused by him making deeply sinful choices and can actually be avoided by him following a more virtuous path. Today we are looking at the infamous Arc 3 which deals with the sin of sloth and the virtue of diligence. The definition of sloth and diligence. The concept of sloth is quite hard to clarify because it has a broad range of applications, but can be better understood by its opposing virtue, diligence. Diligence is the balanced commitment of effort to mental, physical, social and spiritual pursuits, and is also associated with the ethical mindset that work is by itself good, regardless of motivations. This is important because most people make the mistake of thinking that sloth is purely a physical sin, when in fact it can refer to any action of unbalanced effort in mental, physical, social and spiritual pursuits, and potentially can also include the concept that work must be done for a specific reason. This shows that the main difference between the two is not just laziness, but also how balanced one's approach is and how much one cares in various ways. In fact, the very term sloth derives from the Latin accidia, meaning without care. Petelgeuse, the Archbishop representing sloth. Uniquely in Arc 3 we have Petelgeuse, the man representing sloth, to fully showcase its nature. The first time you see him you might be fooled into thinking that he doesn't match the description of sloth by his exaggerated actions and verbal barrages. Contrary to his initial appearance though, Petelgeuse showcases the four main types of sloth. First of all we have mental sloth. As mentioned prior, sloth isn't limited to physical actions, it can also refer to slowness of the mind, with Petelgeuse being the perfect example of this. You see, rather than relying on his own thoughts and deductions, he relies completely on the gospel for instruction. Nowhere is this best shown than when he meets Suburu. In Route 2 he clearly notices that Suburu is overflowing with the smell of the witch to the point that he even suspects him to be the Archbishop Pride. This shows that in his own mind he views Suburu as a person of significance. However, when he meets him he takes no actions against him, positive or negative, instead dismissing his own thoughts and assuming that because Suburu is not written in the gospel that means he must be irrelevant, leaving Suburu in the hands of fate. The irony here is that if Petelgeuse had followed through with his thoughts he may have discovered Suburu's return by death, his connection to the witch, and possibly even been able to possess Suburu in his broken state and usurp his authority. There is also the fact that Petelgeuse awaits in the cave for some time before the attack. While we later learn that the fog from the whale cuts off Roswell's domain in the final day, preventing reinforcements, the reason Petelgeuse attacks then isn't because of the tactical advantage, it's because the gospel most likely instructs him to. His claims of being diligent are also ironic due to his fixation on the gospel, because his reliance on the one linear and unbalanced motivation for his actions are actually in opposition to the definition of diligence. Even in the finale, Tappei reveals in an interview that several of Petelgeuse's fingers survived the attack, which means that if he had withdrawn after his defeat to Julius, Petelgeuse could have replenished his enforcers and counterattacked, just like how Suburu essentially does to him. If he had withdrawn then he could still have completed the ordeal on Amelia, but at a different time, because there was no time limit given to the instruction. However, Sloth's blind faith leads him to be separated from his fingers, leaving him trapped in his current vessel when it expires. Next up is physical slothfulness. This may initially seem an unusual accusation for Petelgeuse because he initially appears quite animated. However, there are 2 points that reveal his physical slothfulness. Firstly, he rarely ever does anything with his own body, especially when he is under pressure. Instead, he completely relies on his authority, unseen hands. He fights Rem, he defends against Suburu, tries to steal Amelia's body, fights the knight, chases after Suburu, fights Julius, chases after the carriage, all using his authority rather than his own physical body. The second major point is related to this in the sense that when he is not using his authority, he is moving with his fingers. The intercepting of Suburu and Wen when they approach the mansion, the capture of Suburu, spying on the village, planting the explosives in the car, are all done by the fingers and not by Petelgeuse himself. Even in the aftermath of the village attack, the villagers don't appear to be killed by unseen hands, but by the weapons of the cultists. They even continue fighting Crusher's forces long after Petelgeuse is defeated. In reality, when Petelgeuse fights directly against other opponents, he himself is actually dispatched quite easily, and is only able to survive by stealing the bodies of his fingers. You could even say that Betelgeuse's usage of unseen hands and his fingers are in fact a substitute so that he doesn't need to move his own real hands and fingers. He even blames his finger that captured Suburu for being slothfulness, when in reality his actions here, along with his mannerisms, are just a mask to hide his own laziness, idleness and indolence. An interesting concept here is that maybe the reason he is always biting his fingers is because he chooses to blame them rather than accept the truth that he himself is slothful. Next up is social slothfulness. By now you should be getting a good idea of how slothful Betelgeuse actually is, but it goes even further than this. He is also socially slothful because he rejects the feelings of others and tries to force his beliefs on others, which could also be considered ethically slothful to some extent as well. Nowhere is this better seen than when he comes face to face with Satella. All this time Betelgeuse has been one-sidedly claiming that he is loved by the witch, but she harshly rejects him, showing that he doesn't understand her at all. Then he chases after Suburu in an effort to possibly kill him, the person Satella truly loves, all in an effort to remove the options and force Satella to love him instead. His forcefulness also comes across in other ways, as he believes that love can only truly be expressed through words, and he tries to force others to do the same. This is seen first with Ren, where, despite clearly showing she has feelings for Suburu, Betelgeuse demands that she puts it into words, and when Amelia dies and he tries to steal and violate her body so Suburu will likewise express his feelings verbally. All of this shows exactly how shallow and uncaring Betelgeuse has become, because not only does he force his beliefs of word over actions onto others, but his own words themselves are shown to be empty and shallow. Next up is spiritual sloth. There is one last major type of slothfulness to talk about, and this is Betelgeuse's lack of effort. You see in the fourth route, when Betelgeuse possesses Suburu, Tappei has revealed that if Ferris and Julius had not chased after him, he would have managed to completely overwhelm Suburu's mind. The irony here is that Suburu running away from the group actually helped Betelgeuse and brought him more time to complete the possession, but the truly important thing here is that it shows that Betelgeuse is very capable of overwhelming Suburu's mind and possessing him. While in the correct route, Satella's rejection may be what pushed him away, it was Betelgeuse himself who actually severed the connection. So this begs the question, what if Betelgeuse hadn't severed the connection but continued to try to dominate Suburu? Or even if he was pushed out, what if he had repossessed Suburu when he was separated from Julius near the end of the fight? The answer is that Betelgeuse would probably have been able to completely wear down Suburu's mind and possess him. This still applies even in the correct route, but instead he fails once and gives up, resorting to brute force to achieve his objective. One final minor point here is that Satella only seems to react when Suburu verbally tells someone about their contract, so if Betelgeuse had stopped Suburu from talking, then it is possible that Suburu wouldn't have been able to invoke the witch in the first place. Suburu, the reflection of sloth. We have talked about Betelgeuse and how he represents sloth. However, one interesting thing about Arc 3 is that this is the first arc where there is a significant amount of content before the death cycles begin, and it's in this actual content that we see that Suburu himself is actually also very slothful, and in many ways a reflection of Betelgeuse himself. First up is Suburu's mental slothfulness. Roswell is a very sharp-minded individual, and it's his actions that reveal how slow-minded Suburu actually is. You see in the throne room, Roswell planned to reveal Puck, aka the Beast of the End, in order to demonstrate Amelia's power, and he manipulates several people in order to pull this off, but the most manipulated of all is Suburu himself. Firstly, he is aware that Suburu will ignore Amelia's words and try to sneak into the throne room, which is why he orders Rem not to obstruct him. This is done in advance. Then he quickly figures out Priscilla and is able to force her to withdraw from Suburu when Suburu himself is being overwhelmed by her. Then Roswell plays on Amelia's motions in order to keep Suburu in the throne room. He then provokes Suburu and casts Algoa in order to lure Puck out, and all this time Roswell was moving Suburu like a piece on a chessboard without Suburu himself ever realizing it until it is already all over. Even Roswell himself is surprised that Suburu would misunderstand to this extent. One huge potential dangerous sign that Suburu misses about Roswell here is when he talks about the requirements for Suburu to be a knight, mentioning that Suburu needs a special something in order to carve a path to his goal, possibly alluding to the fact that he is aware of Suburu's ability, but once again Suburu misses this potential reference. He is also unaware of Priscilla when he tells Rom about the fruit vendor, leading Elle to essentially ambush him the next day, already knowing Suburu's goal, while Suburu himself is left both surprised and clueless, allowing Priscilla to toy with him to her heart's desire. Even the fact that he casually gets into the coach of a rival claimant shows a complete lack of awareness on his part. Remember that Priscilla threatens to cut him down inside, showing he has entered a potentially dangerous place. Next up is Suburu's physical slothfulness. In the case of Suburu, quite a lot of Suburu's spiritual slothfulness overlaps with his physical slothfulness, so will be covered later, but there are a few points to be made by this by Julius, and that is having the physical means to obtain your goals. Note that Suburu accepts the fight with Julius because he fails to understand that Julius is simply trying to teach him an important life lesson, and instead misinterprets it as Julius provoking him. Julius actually gives Suburu the option to admit his carelessness and end the fight, but Suburu continues on without the physical means to back up his claim of being a knight. The result is that Suburu, despite his beliefs, is defeated because his physical power is lacking. Suburu also does this with Priscilla, where he runs in believing that it is his job to save her, but we later find out that Priscilla is in fact way stronger than him anyway, and it is debatable whether he could even beat the thieves. Next up is Suburu's social slothfulness. Emilia is perhaps the best example of Suburu forcing his mindset on others while failing to respect and consider their own feelings. Suburu has saved Emilia several times by victory and has gained a sense of accomplishment every time, but the fact that Suburu keeps getting himself hurt for her sake only fills Emilia with a sense of guilt, making her feel responsible. Suburu himself makes this worse by saying that he is doing this all for her sake, increasing the burden of Emilia's guilt, but also making her feel powerless in the process. This is probably a factor in why she hires Felix, the best healer, to treat him, both out of concern for his welfare, but also that she can feel like she is able to do something to pay him back. The next big issue comes at the throne room. Emilia has already mentioned her view on the importance of promises, however Suburu casually breaks his promise to stay and rest, instead appearing as a companion of one of her rivals. The irony here is that he could have arrived with Rem if he had been more aware of her feelings. It would also have been far less suspicious to arrive with a member of the Emilia camp. But also, as a recognised servant of Emilia and Roswell, she could also have been Suburu's ticket into the castle. He then proceeds to damage the reputation of the Emilia camp by insulting the knights present, by casually claiming to be one without understanding the significance of his claim. Note that the knights have influence in the kingdom and include powerful families like the Astria family, whose support Emilia will need if she is going to be the ruler. Additionally, Emilia never recognised Suburu as her knight, simply claiming that title without her support or permission, and then to top it off, fighting Julius and getting hurt again. The critical moment, however, is when Emilia asks him to explain his actions and he simply tells her that she wouldn't understand. Remember that Emilia doesn't know about return by death, so from Emilia's perspective, it looks as though Suburu doesn't trust her and he's also hiding his intentions, which in turn destroys her trust in him. This arguably becomes a factor later when Emilia doesn't listen to Suburu when he warns her of the incoming cult's attack. In addition to these, there are plenty of other cases of Suburu forcing his will on others. For example, he is verbally aggressive to the fruit vendor because he doesn't like Emilia, but Suburu himself doesn't understand how much fear and hate is associated with half-elves, because he isn't a resident of this world, and so he hasn't suffered through the demi-human war or the witch swallowing half the world. Then when he interferes with Priscilla, he tells her that she should be grateful that he came to save her, when, as mentioned earlier, she was far stronger than anyone present, including the deluded Suburu. Priscilla simply wants things to be interesting, and Suburu tries to force his mentality on her to suit himself. Finally, we have Suburu's spiritual slothfulness. Wilhelm becomes the one to expose Suburu's spiritual slothfulness during the training sessions. You see, Suburu does put effort in, but only in times when it is required. Compare that to Wilhelm, who claims to have trained constantly for half his life. This should be an inspiring story for Suburu because Wilhelm explains that he was once at the same level that Suburu is now, and through effort he was able to overcome his own weakness. Remember that Suburu has returned by death, so even if he encounters a hurdle, if he keeps training diligently and increasing his power, he will in most cases be able to overcome any hurdle eventually. But even if he doesn't need that power yet, diligently training will help him prepare for the dangers of tomorrow. The harsh truth of Suburu, however, is that he isn't diligent. For example, before he was summoned, he had a basic experience with kendo, and his father is seen using martial arts on him. If he had been training these diligently, imagine how different the fights with the thugs, Elsa, Rem and the demon beast could have gone. How many deaths could have been avoided and new options opened by having that power. Even since he has come to this world, the most he has done is training cardio aesthetics with the villagers, but has he actually done anything to increase his power and stay ahead of the curve? He tried magic, and it's unfortunate that his gait is defective, but he has never trained in swords, even after Reinhardt and Elsa showed him how powerful melee fighters could be if they trained. All these come together to show just how slothful Suburu actually is, especially when compared with the other knights. Reinhardt, Julius, Wilhelm and even Al have combat skills which they train diligently, and show great care and awareness towards others, while Suburu doesn't. The Death Roots of Arc 3. Death Root 1. Mental Sloth. The moment that decides Subaru's fate in this route is slightly hard to decipher, because on one hand Subaru's lack of awareness towards his own slothfulness meant that he only knew about the attack after Rem sensed Ram's anger, so he wouldn't have been able to see Amelia anyway, thanks to the overall slothfulness which separated himself and Amelia earlier. But on the other hand, it was his actions after he realised something was off at the mansion that settled his own fate. You see, the whole situation was bad to begin with. Chris even says that Ram must have signalled because she didn't want the others to get involved. Even more than that though, the White Whale was active by this point and had covered the path in its fog, cutting the Margrave territory off from the outside world and making it difficult and dangerous for anyone, even the Royal Knights, to assist the mansion. Suburu, however, charges in completely lacking in preparation and awareness, the very traits Julius had cautioned him on earlier. When him and Rem reach the inn, she runs off without him realising, but if you look back at the start of the arc, that is the exact behaviour that Ram had warned him about when she told him to look after Rem in the first place. When he enters the mansion, he completely misses the frozen cultist in the ice at first, and loses his fingers by touching the frozen door handle. In this route, Suburu shows a complete lack of awareness. In the correct route, he is painfully aware of what he is up against, and his own capabilities in relation to it, leading him to recognise the need for more power and allies. The result is that he notices several things that he didn't before, such as Roswell's purpose in leaving Rem behind with him, and recognising that Julius's early words were constructive criticism rather than just plain criticism, which leads to them recounselling their bond and gaining his assistance and even sharing his senses in the battle with Sloth. There is also one other scene here that is important, and that is Rem's declaration of love. You see, Suburu loves Amelia far more than Rem, so abandoning her and choosing to run away with Rem can be seen as a way of running away and giving up. In some ways, it's also a reflection of his choice to embrace fantasy or reality, with Rem representing escapism, embracing isekai lifestyle and living a slow life in another world, just like in the comics he reads before he was summoned. The choice of Amelia, however, represents him accepting his reality, and rather than cowering or trying to escape, he is resolving himself to overcome its challenges. Death Route 2. Physical Sloth. The moment that decides Subaru's fate in this route is unfortunately from the start. In this route, Suburu is traumatized and broken down by the events of the previous route, the severity of the situation and the unknown elements of the cult. The result is that he spends all the time he could be using productively in a state of shock and inactivity. The result is that he isn't able to gain any allies or warn anyone about what is to come. Instead, he mindlessly follows Rem without warning her of the cult. He doesn't even fight back when the cultists capture him. Although it's unlikely, if he had warned her, maybe they could have found a way through to the mansion, or even got there earlier, which could have allowed the Amelia camp and even the villagers to fight united. Note that in Death Route 1, the reason everyone dies is because they fight Petelgeuse in small groups, such as the villagers who are ambushed, the mansion residents who hold him off, Amelia and Puck who fight in the mansion's secret passage, Rem who rushes ahead, and finally Suburu who arrives after everything is already over. In the correct route, however, Suburu doesn't waste a second. First he contacts Anastasia and the merchants and gets them to support the Crush camp. Then he negotiates directly with Crush, acts as a law for the whale to help her forces, clears up the misunderstanding with the blank letter, takes out the witch cult spy in the village, ambushes Petelgeuse before he can even make a move, saves Amelia from the explosive firestones in the carriage, and he does all this with a united force. Death Route 3. Social Sloth. The moment that decides Subaru's fate in this route is the negotiation with Crush. As you see in my early analysis of Suburu, he prioritised his own feelings to the point that he forces his opinions on other people and ignores their own. The first mistake he makes with Crush is not to understand her character. You see in the meal early in the arc, Crush says that she wants to try as hard as she can to do what she needs to do, and that she would like her opponents to do the same. In this case, Suburu, however, isn't actually trying to negotiate, he is just trying to give everything up and beg, completely ignoring her character, which responds well to resolve. Then instead of offering her help in her pursuits, he practically demands that she drops all of her current preparations for the White Whale, which are already well underway, to come help him fight a Sin Archbishop, a dangerous enemy with no beneficial reason for her to do so, quite literally taking the shortest route to solve the problem. Finally, Crush shows that she is caring by inviting him to dinner after noticing a darkness in him, and she hints that she might have responded positively if Suburu's reason was to protect Emilia, but the reason he gives is drenched in his own desire to kill Betelgeuse after the events of the previous route, which makes him seem both desperate, selfish and malicious. Given the fact that he also knows knowledge which should only be known by members of the witch cult, this makes him even more suspicious, to the point that even Wilhelm, who views him positively, steps in. While this is the main case, his social slothfulness carries on, reacting badly when Rem sacrifices herself and Otto forgets her. Remember, from Otto's point of view, there never was a Rem, so it looks like Suburu has just randomly attacked him, possibly in an attempt to save himself during the attack of the whale, which is undoubtedly a factor which leads to Otto, a normally very kind-hearted individual, to push Suburu off the cart. When Ram doesn't remember Rem, he doesn't react as badly but still doesn't try to see things from her perspective. Then comes Emilia, where he tries to do the right thing by telling her the truth, but fails to consider the feelings of the witch, resulting in her killing Emilia. Even after this, he might have actually still been able to save himself by holding out with Beatrice in the mansion, but instead he asks her to kill him to end his pain, without any regard to her own feelings, leading him being thrown into the path of Puck. While his death was certain by this point, since there was nothing left to lose, he could have still tried to explain his ability to Puck in an effort to gain more information that could have helped him save Emilia in the next routes. While it wouldn't have saved him then, it shows a lack of effort as he was all too eager to give up before it was truly over, ignoring Wilhelm's words by his final actions. In the correct route, Suburu shows that he understands Crush's perspective much better by offering to help with the White Whale and even factoring into account Crush's consideration for Wilhelm's feelings. He finally understands Roswell's purpose in leaving Ren with him, who gave her the authority to discuss the alliance and offer mining rights to Elia Forest. Unlike in the palace where he left her behind, he instead takes Ren with him this time, showing that he has greater consideration for her feelings. He understands the feelings of the merchants, probably due to Otto, in regards to the whale, which allows him to bring Anastasia's mercenary company on board and use the connection with the merchants to divert traffic and evacuate the village in Roswell's domain, saving the villagers. After the battle with the whale, he sends Wilhelm to explain about the blank letter, showing empathy to Ram's situation, as in certain societies a blank letter can be misinterpreted as a declaration of war. Finally, while it may be cruel to leave her out of this loop, Suburu protects Emilia, demonstrating that his feelings aren't just words like Betelgeuse, by backing them up with actions, ultimately even saving her life from the explosives. Death Route 4, Spiritual Sloth. The moment that decides Suburu's fate in this route is when Betelgeuse possesses him. The irony here is that Suburu's situation is virtually identical to his situation in the correct route, as it's the exact same options available open to him. While Betelgeuse would have completely possessed Suburu if this situation had continued, he instead chooses to end it prematurely by having either Julius or Felix kill him. In the correct route, Suburu embraces Wilhelm's words and fights on, using everything and all means at his disposal to win against Betelgeuse. The result is that he overcomes his fear of the witch's hands and uses her to expel Betelgeuse from him. Interestingly, there was another way for Suburu to solve this though. Betelgeuse can possess people that are compatible with spirits, but he can't possess those people if they are already contracted with another spirit. What is clear from the beginning of this arc is that Beatrice is starting to have feelings towards Suburu, and Suburu also shows concern for her by wanting to evacuate the mansion during the battle with Sloth. She also says in Death Route 3 that she doesn't want to see any more pain, and perhaps if Suburu had picked up on Beatrice's feelings and situation, he might have been able to forge a contract with her, preventing Betelgeuse from possessing him at all. This sadly brings us to the end of the video. There is more to say, but I've moved it to a separate video to avoid spoilers for anime watchers, and will be uploading that at some point later. Big thanks to Reinhardt, aka Hickey, one of my subs, who has actually been proofreading my scripts. I was actually worried that when he saw the script he might have a heart attack due to how long it was, but thank God, all those divine blessings have saved him. As mentioned earlier, I've started a Discord as well, so come and join us on there if you want, but that's all for now. Thanks for watching and I hope to see you next time.